I am an early guy, I want to come early. But anyways, we got on well together. But rarely such people are born. Rarely. I tell you, I am filled with emotion right now. I do not have spoken but for his insistence. The way he helped me also at times, I can forget about. It was like losing not my younger, but for me, an elder brother. That's all I can say about him. God bless his soul. God bless his soul. Thank
you. A few days ago I have posted a post which is written by me, not copied. Lust and love, there's a difference. Mr. Batra, we remember, not because he was a money man or he was a great lawyer, because we loved him. Love is taking, love is giving. So once you start loving somebody for any subject, professional life, mother, sister, girlfriend, wife, children, your knowledge, this means giving. Like I love my knowledge, I love it. I don't have a lust for knowledge. I say whatever I know, whatever it is like I share with people, I share. So the people like Mr. Bhatia there inside, very rarely he comes in time. So we have a perennial complaint with him, but today because of this session he came in time. So knowledge is giving. Whatever you learn here, you have a duty, responsibility to share with people you know. So M.S. Arora is an inspiration. The kind of Gurbani story he narrates, it will shock you. You cannot even hear this Gurdwara. Because he picks up a particular what we're discussing, and he tells you what Gurbani means. Mr. Bhatia can narrate so many stutis which we cannot even read in Sanskrit. So these are people who are great not because they are seniors, not because they have done more work than us, not because they have made more money than us, because they have made themselves great by applying their knowledge. This is what this study session is. Acquiring a knowledge is not enough. Can you apply and continue to enrich your knowledge for the welfare of your own self and welfare of your colleagues? That's what Mr. Batra was. His one word was command to me at least. I could never ever say no to him. And I've never said no to him. Many things I didn't like what they do in politics in the bar. I don't like personally because I'm not in politics. But once he said, you vote for this man, I may have hated that man, I voted for that man. Such people not only persuade you to live life, and money, he is never bothered, I can tell you. Anybody goes, अभी बाहर में आते हैं जिनको हम लोग बैठे कल ही कोई आदमी आया था तो क्यों खड़े हो सर मेरे घर में राशन नहीं वो तो वो पैसे देता मैं तो मैंने पैसे दिए. So the knowledge, the money, the status you acquire, if you can use it for the welfare of mankind, welfare of your own colleagues, juniors, seniors, your servants, जो भी आपसे नीचे हैं लोग आपके ऊपर ही बहुत, that's the word of God. I will request Mr. Bhatia to speak few words on this session, not on Mr. Raj Batra, so that we can start the proceedings. We are starting the litigation module today, the appellate part. Mr. Bhatia has been a standing senior government counsel for over 4 decades. That is the experience he possesses, other side of law. And he has been an inspiration to entire sales tax bar, not only our bar, but other all India bodies, where people clamor to take him in as chairman or vice chairman because his sheer knowledge and experience and his simplicity, his humbleness. I love him for this. Now the guy is too simple, humble. I can't be that humble and simple. I can never be. It's not possible for me to become like him. But that is what he taught us. That's why we love him, respect you, sir. Thank you so much.
सब नीचे बैठ जाए बैठ के यार जल्दी खाएगा 50 मिनट लेता तो नो?
हाँ सर प्लीज थोड़ी आवाज़ क्लियर हो जाए।
आवाज फिल्टर हो गया। What could be a better tribute to Mr. Raj K. Batra than what Mr. Verma is doing here? There was no other Raj K. Batra in the bar. There is not, and there will not be another Raj K. Batra. His benevolence, nobody can match. The moment he would come to know that any person, whether known to him or not, is in some problem or some difficulty, he would do much more than what that person would be expecting. One of our bar employees was saying the other day, हमारे माँ बाप ने तो हमें पैदा किया, पर हमें पाला पोसा बतरा साहब ने, हम तो अनाथ हो गए हैं उनके जाने से. These were the words of an employee coming from his heart. One of our very senior members of the bar, one day he attempted to commit suicide from this building. Somehow he was saved. Probably the reason was that his son was not looking after his father. Mr. Batra, at that time he was the president. Whatever was required by him, he helped that person. And till his death, he continued to pay 15,000 rupees per month to him for years together. One of our bar employees, his motorbike was stolen. Mr. Batra came forward, arranged a motorcycle for him. Recently, one of our another employees, he was to be a operative surgeon. For surgery, he required about 70,000 rupees. Mr. Batra collected that amount. But then bar decided that they would pay that amount to the hospital. Every month we 3-4 friends used to go to Vrindavan. There was a lady who used to stand near Bhake Bihari Mandir's street. She claimed that she was, I don't know whether it is correct or not, but she said that she was from Bombay and she was PhD. She had done PhD. But then she used to carry a placard, Bhiksham Dehi. Mr. Batra started giving initially 100 rupees whenever we would go every month, then raised it to 500. Then during COVID period, before COVID period, supposing for during COVID period for a month or another we could not go there, whenever he would go, he would pay him for the other periods also, other months also, for which he had not gone there. And then during COVID period, when he was told that she may not be coming out of her home wherever she is residing, and maybe that she needs more, he started paying her 15,000 rupees per month. Even if he was not going, he would send it by post or through somebody. That was Mr. Raj K. Batra. As Mr. M.S. Arora may have told you, we three were together since 1976. It has been a long journey, but it has really been a memorable journey for us, at least for three of us. Every year, at least twice a year, we would go out with our children to some hill station or to some place outside Delhi. Twice a year we would go. So far as I am concerned, since we were together, even in the by writing the proceedings, the officer would write on the order sheet, present Mr. Gst Batra, and for him they would write Mr. Raj K. Bhatia. That was our relationship. Even after he left us, Mr. Sanjay Sharma, he was with me,
we were coming from the tribunal. The registrar of the tribunal was coming from the other side. Mr. Batra had left us, but then he still called me. Batra साहब कैसे हैं? Then Sanjay Sharma told him that he is Mr. Bhatia. Thereafter he started. To my surprise, was it my client or somebody who had never met Mr. Batra? He came to me and at least twice or thrice he said, Batra, Mr. Batra, Mr. Batra. He started calling me Mr. Batra. So कुछ तो हुआ इसके लिए. Yes. From today onwards, Mr. Verma is going to teach you about litigation. A teacher like him loves you from the core of his heart. But you also have to be scared of him. Even I am scared of him. That is why I was there in time. Litigation is definitely very challenging, but it is rewarding also. You must accept the challenge because that gives you satisfaction. If you have put in your labor, if you have put in hard work, I often used to say that so far as surgeons are concerned, every new patient on whom surgery is to be performed is their examination, is their test. So is true of litigation also. Every new case, हमारे भी butterflies होती हैं जब किसी भी केस के अंदर जाते हैं. But if you have worked hard, इसका भी दूंगा एग्जाम्पल जो आपको दूंगा वर्मा जी ने कहा है. Even sometimes you may find that there is a Supreme Court judgment which is against you. What do? Don't try to hide that judgment from the judge because maybe he is knowing and he may think that you are trying to mislead him. Try to distinguish that judgment. I'll give you an example of that also. If you have worked hard, you are confident about your case. Sometimes you have to surrender, you have to make it honest statement before the judge. Yes, sir, I have no case, but still I am trying my client's case. Sometimes just one sentence does the magic. एक एग्जाम्पल देता हूँ. DCM now under the VAT Act there was a provision of appeal to the High Court under Section 81 on substantial question of law. It was substantial question of law. Under the Sales Tax Act there used to be a provision for reference to the High Court on question of law. Income Tax Act also there is provision for reference. There was. DCM they had a case. But High Court said, no question of law arises. In this case, they refused to accept the reference. Probably you people may have heard the name of Mr. Ashok Sen. He was the person who became the law minister, union law minister for maximum number of times. But the day he would resign, next day he would be appearing in the Supreme Court for 5-6 cases. So DCM people approached Mr. Ashok Sen. He filed an SLP against the refusal of the High Court to call a question of law on reference. And he just said one sentence to the Supreme Court. My lords, we are disputing a tax liability of about 482 crores and the High Court says there is no substantial question, there is no question of law. And just on this one sentence, his SLP was admitted as an appeal. And Supreme Court said, इसमें मैंने कहा कि एक बार brevity भी just one sentence, and that reference was admitted by the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court sent back the matter to the High Court. Yes, question of law arises here and decide this matter. A lawyer who is doing litigation, he has to be witty also. इसलिए जजेस के लिए भी कहा जाता है कि उनको बहुत ज़्यादा पढ़ना पड़ता है, लिटरेचर भी पढ़ेंगे और भी सब कुछ पढ़ेंगे, शेर व शायरी भी पढ़ेंगे, बीच बीच में वो भी करेंगे, कुछ लोगों की आदत होती है कोर्ट में भी वो शेर व शायरी भी करते हैं। ब्रिटिश पीरियड का एक मेरे को इंसिडेंट ध्यान है, प्रोबब्ली इट वाज आई थिंक एडवोकेट सप्रू। देयर वाज अ British judge, he would come to the court with his dog, and while the counsel is arguing a matter, he would start petting his dog. So this Mr. Sapru, when he was in the midst of his arguments, he just stopped. Just said, yes, what happened? He said, my lord, I thought that my lord is in consultation. He was petting his dog. Similarly, he was ASC. I was in the High Court on that day. Suddenly, there was electricity failure. And just see the bit. He says, I throw some light. Because judges were not listening to him. He said, I throw some light. So that was the bit. और जब मैंने कहा कि कई बार हमारे को पढ़ना पड़ता है, दो सेवन इंस्टांसेस बताता हूँ. In one of the matters, I was representing the department. The moment I stood, the bench comprised of Mr. Sanjay Kishan Kaul, who is now judge of the High Court, and Mr. Shakdar, who is heading the tax bench. Mr. Shakdar said, Mr. Bhatia, only 15 days back we have decided a matter against you in the case of Lloyd's. जो ये bridge हो गया, ये cases वगैरह होना. Then said, my lord, may kindly hear me. And other side there was senior counsel who was appearing. He said, we have deposited the tax, but we are disputing only the interest liability. Interest पे शायद आपको भी ये बता दूँ, ये भी तो बीच में आपके अंदर. There was a decision of ACC in which two judges said that even if you have paid the tax due, because the issue before the court was that whether interest is to be paid from the date of assessment, supposing some demand is created, thereafter if you don't pay, whether interest is to be paid from that, or it is to be paid from the date of filing of your return, after the demand has been created. Two judges said that yes, interest is to be paid because you didn't, is to be paid from the date of filing of the return. The provision was that a person was required to pay tax due according to the return. Justice Bhagwati, one of the finest and one of the most intelligent judges of the Supreme Court, he said, no, he gave a dissenting judgment. He said, an assessee cannot be expected to predict what would be his final assessment. Therefore, if he has paid the tax due according to the return, then no interest liability arises. Subsequently, this matter went to the Constitution Bench comprising of five judges in the case of J.K. Synthetics. And view of Justice Bhagwati was approved by those five judges. They said, yes, law only requires you to pay tax due according to the return, and if you have paid the tax due according to the return, then your liability would arise only after a notice of demand has been served, and you have failed to pay tax within 30 days, which is the prescribed period after that, and not from the date of filing of the return. They approved the view of Justice Bhagwati. So the moment I stood, this was also a case that their party was relying, and that is a reported judgment in the case of Moon Hotel, running into about 30-35 cases. The moment I stood, Justice Shakdar said, Mr. Bhatia, only 15 days back we have decided against your department. I said, my lord, may kindly hear me. Because the senior counsel, the senior advocate who was appearing on behalf of Moon Hotels, he said we have paid the tax, only we are disputing the interest liability on the ground that we have paid tax due according to the return, and in view of J.K. Synthetics, no interest is chargeable. After they finished, I said, my lords, for the last so many years, there was a real determination which was against them. Bombay High Court had held against them. There were number of years, in all those years, they were disputing their tax liability, but the law was against them. I said, my lord, there is a verification column. Even in that JK synthetic, there is a rider where the court said that it must be, once we say that tax due according to the return, it must be a true and correct return. And there is a column for verification also, that whatever has been stated in the return is correct. And my lord, there is this verification is not correct. Their return was not true and correct because commissioner held determination against them, tribunal held against them, high court held against them, and even for years together again they are paying the tax. They are paying the tax and they are claiming exemption on this ground. The court said yes, they are liable to pay interest. Similarly, in one of the cases recently, tribunal has also heard that in case of multi-function printers. The question before the High Court was a petition was filed by a number of these companies who are selling these multi-function printers. The question was whether it is a printer or because the rate of tax on printer was less or it is something else. Earlier the case was with some other counsel, Mr. Justice Deepak Mishra, he was the Chief Justice. The moment the counsel representing the department stood, from the other side Mr. S. Ganesh, senior advocate, he was appearing on behalf of those companies. Said, my lord, only last week Supreme Court has decided that even multi-function printer is a printer. It was a case under the Custom Act. Justice Deepak Mishra passed an order saying that you seek instruction from the department to the counsel who was appearing at that time that you will follow the Supreme Court judgment. That case was subsequently assigned to me. The moment I stood, he repeated the same thing. I said, my lord, that was a case under the Customs Act. That is a state subject. I will show that the judgment of the Supreme Court is distinguishable. He granted a judgment. Then twice or thrice the matter was adjourned. Thereafter the matter reached another bench headed by Justice Sanjeev Khanna. When the matter came up for hearing, senior counsels started arguing. There were 3 or 4 senior advocates, not senior counsels. Senior counsels, whoever is elder in age, we call them, or who has been in practice for some years, we call them senior counsels. There is distinction. Senior advocate is a designation which is granted by the court. So 2, 3 senior advocates argued. Next day my turn came. I argued for about half an hour. Then they rose for lunch. And I think the biggest compliment of my life was from Mr. Sanjeev Khanna, who is one of the strictest judges. After they assembled, after lunch, when they assembled, he said, Mr. Bhatia, we were discussing during the lunch period, and we were really impressed the way you presented the case. So I think that was the biggest compliment that I got. And ultimately, they said yes, because I said, custom the provisions are different. Here, under the DVA Act, the provisions are different. Although that judgment was pronounced by them after about 2-3 months, and in the meanwhile, sometimes judges also forget some of your arguments. But still, they said yes, it is for the authorities to decide whether it is primarily a printer or it does some other functions also. और जो मैंने वो बाद में कहा था सुप्रीम कोर्ट को डिस्टिंग्विश करना है, उसका भी सिर्फ एक एग्जाम्पल देता हूँ. वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट यू must be knowing. Supreme Court, in the case of L&T, the question before the Supreme Court was that whether the turnover of subcontractor can also be subjected to tax in the hands of the contractor. And Supreme Court said because in the case of works contract, subject matter of taxation is transfer of property and goods during the execution of the contract. And property passes the moment you use that material in that works contract. There is transfer of property. And since transfer of property has already taken when the subcontractor has used that material, therefore the turnover of subcontractor cannot be included in the turnover of the main contractor. All the states were following. Delhi also, L&T, they filed 54 writ petitions. And they were being represented by Mr. Venkatraman, whom I consider even better than Mr. Ganesh, who is one of the finest and best judges in the field of indirect taxes. I thought there was a tax liability of about 500-600 crores.
600 crores.
600 crores. I thought I should not take one myself. Supposing tomorrow the matter goes against me. Just for namesake, I thought that we'll engage some PS. I suggested to the department. They said, okay. We went to one AST. We briefed him for about 2-3 hours. It was, I think, Saturday. Yes. Monday the case was reached. Monday when he came, I asked his junior, did you brief him yesterday? He said, yes. For 6 hours, about 6 hours, I briefed him that this is the position. Now, when Mr. Venkataraman finished, and we have to respond, he stood, ये भी फर्क होता है कि आपका सब्जेक्ट है या नहीं है. That was not his subject. So he started with section 3, charging section. Then he started sweating. His face turned red. Justice A.K. Sikri, he was the acting chief justice that time, sitting with, I don't recall who was the other. After he finished, I also thought that we are finished. And Mr. Venkataraman in the rejoinder, I think one of the best rejoinders I ever heard. And in the court itself, some people, they started congratulating him. Justice Sikri said, reserved for order. I could not stop myself. I stood, I said, my lords, I want to give an example. They say, because that is a state subject, every state has its own law. They say the turnover of the subcontractor should not be taxed in the hands of the contractor. We also don't tax the turnover of the subcontractor, but we have different mechanism of input tax credit and output tax credit. Whatever contract has been executed by the subcontractor, he would raise a tax invoice on the contractor. Tax invoice on the basis of tax invoice, the main contractor, whatever is his liability, he would deduct that input tax from his output liability and he'll pay the balance. Supposing there is a contract of 1 lakh, rate is 10%. On 10,000, they say if subcontractor has been awarded a contract of 50,000, his liability should only be 5,000. But the same is what we do. That he will raise an invoice on tax invoice on me, charging 5,000 rupees as and which I will claim as input tax. My liability is 10,000 and it is 5,000. He said, can you give me this in writing? I said, yes. And then that judgment, Delhi was probably the only state where they decided in favor of the department. Although, yes, only. And then this case is now before the Supreme Court. Whatever Supreme Court likes, yes, they may say anything. But what I was telling, that even if there is a Supreme Court judgment, we cannot hide it from the court and try to distinguish that judgment. इस तरह के बहुत सारे हैं किसे चलते
I will just add one thing to this. The moment ASG, Mr. Tankha was arguing, because I was also in the case on the other side, though L&T had not appointed us at that time, they directly went to Venkataraman. We told Bhatia Sahab there in the court, why did you just got this Tankha in this case? You had done much better than this. And it was the result of Mr. Bhatia that the short note which he had submitted to the Honorable Chief Justice, the case was in their favor.
तो litigation के अंदर आपको जरूरत है कि आपके facts, you should be strong in your facts. You must be knowing each and every fact, and you must be knowing the facts. You must be knowing, should be more than the client, more than the officer who knows and who has conducted their assessment or who has framed their assessment. You should be master of the facts. Then you should know what is the law. For law we have already discussed. They go to the statute and read the Bare Act. After reading the Bare Act, then go to the case law. It is not that straightway go to the case law. एक just केस निकाला, गूगल के ऊपर आजकल होता यही है. हाई कोर्ट में सब लोग यही करते हैं. जो आजकल यंग जनरेशन जितनी भी आ रही है, गूगल पे गए, एक केस ढूंढा और उसके बेस के ऊपर वो सोच किया कि हमारे को पूरा लॉ आ गया है, समझ आ गया एक केस के ऊपर. तो वो नहीं. Go to the Bare Act, go to the rules, go to the notifications, then see what are the judgments and which are the judgments which are in your favor. Prepare your case on the basis of that. शुरू में अगर आपको कुछ घबराहट भी होती है तो अपने घर में प्रैक्टिस करें उसको, अपने ब्रीफ को अच्छी तरह से पढ़ें। उसका भी एक तरीका हम उसके अंदर के अंदर भी बताते रहे हैं कि यू शुड बी ऑडिबल ऑल्सो, यू शुड बी लाउड एनफ so that judge can listen to you. Assertive और उसके अंदर फर्क है, मैंने पहले भी बताया था कि वो नहीं होना चाहिए कि आप गुस्सा दिखा रहे हैं या वो कर रहे हैं, वो नहीं होना चाहिए। प्रैक्टिस करें आप। वर्मा साहब ने कहा तो हिम्मत नहीं हो रही, पर फिर भी एक वो आप लोगों के लिए। एंड यस, ऑलवेज बिलीव दैट गॉड इज विद यू, यू आर नॉट अलोन, एंड यू विल रिसीव हिज ब्लेसिंग्स। आपने कहा एक छोटा सा
We are all enjoying it.
This I heard, I liked it, और मेरे को बहुत अच्छा लगता है, इसलिए वही सुना रहा हूँ, बोल देता हूँ। न सबूत है न दलील है, न सबूत है न दलील है, न सबूत है न दलील है, मेरे साथ रब्बे जलील है, मेरे साथ रब्बे जलील है, तेरी रहमतों में कमी नहीं, तेरी रहमतों में कमी नहीं, तेरी रहमतों में कमी नहीं, मेरे एहतियात में ढील है। उसकी तो रहमतें होती रहती हैं, हमारी कोशिशों में कमी रह जाती है। न सबूत है न दलील है, तेरा नाम कितना है मुख्तसर, बहुत छोटा सा नाम है, गॉड, राम, कृष्ण, कुछ भी हम कह देते हैं, वाहिगुरु, जितने भी हम कहें छोटे छोटे हैं, मुख्तसर कहते हैं छोटे को। तेरा नाम कितना है मुख्तसर, तेरा जिक्र कितना काबिल है। कबीर को कहते हैं बहुत बड़ा, बहुत। और आपने देखा कि हजारों करोड़ों के अंदर जो है उनके ऊपर ग्रंथ भी लिखे गए हैं, किताबें भी लिखी गई हैं, और फिर भी पूरा हम बता नहीं सकते। उसकी इतनी मेहरबानियां होती हैं हमारे ऊपर कि हम उसको डिस्क्राइब नहीं कर सकते। तेरा नाम कितना है मुख्तसर, तेरा नाम कितना है मुख्तसर, तेरा नाम कितना है मुख्तसर, तेरा जिक्र कितना तावील है, न सबूत है न दलील है, मेरे साथ रब्बे जलील है। मुझे कौन तुझसे अलग करे, मुझे कौन तुझसे अलग करे, मुझे कौन तुझसे अलग करे, मैं अटूट प्यास तू झील है, मैं अटूट प्यास तू झील है, मैं अटूट प्यास तू झील है, न सबूत है न दलील है, न सबूत है न दलील है, न सबूत है न दलील है, मेरे साथ रब्बे जलील है। और मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि वर्मा जी ने जिस तरह से आपको पढ़ाया है और जिस तरह से लिटिगेशन की ट्रेनिंग देंगे, ऑल ऑफ यू वुड बी सक्सेसफुल इन लिटिगेशन।
is what faith can do to us. There are three words: trust, belief, faith. Faith is blind. Trust and belief are not. Trust you experience, believe what you read. Faith is what we have. So such people like Mr. Bhatia, Mr. Arora, Mr. Rajpatra, they imbibed faith in our bodies. We could blindly trust them. What they say is correct. So he has blessed this class. You would be successful because he was my teacher also. Whatever little I learned from him, and I kept learning from him, indirectly from him. Wherever he argues, I go sit back, something more content. So reading books is not enough. I always think you may have read 100 books, but what your father and mother knows, you don't know. Because they are still 30, 40 years ahead of you. So why I love and revere Mr. M.S. Arora? Not because of knowledge. Legal knowledge is much more than it, I am very sure about it. But the application of that knowledge to what is right, to experience, that's what I don't possess. That's what you don't possess at present. So when you get this knowledge here, this faith in God, I am not a very big God believer. I'm not an atheist. I do believe in God, but I don't know all this. I have never done a puja, but this faith in anybody. I told you a story about ishq. Do you remember? So ये आपको आप subject से ishq करना होगा. What you're going to see today is going to be a very different presentation. You would have unheard in your classes. What I have prepared for you guys. The basic of litigation. So how do you read law? What we have read, act, that's one part. But this experience of Mr. Bhatia, I think we will keep this in mind for next 8 or 9 sessions we have, 8 or 9 classes on this issue, so that every judgment we see, we first read the way ahead. I told you never read a book. I never ever read a book. My own friends write, I don't open their books ever. But this is their view. You have to form your view first. What is your view? You know and or comma, full stop, all interpretation now you know. You can read the law. Read the law, master the facts, that's more important. Then say whether you have the knowledge. Never hesitate as a lawyer to take a second opinion. Intellectual arrogance about your knowledge is good. But applying this intellectual arrogance, I know all, that is absolutely suicidal. If Harish always gets 40 lakh rupees per hearing, तो कुछ तो उसमें होगा ना, जो हमारे में नहीं है. समझ को तालीदार भी नहीं देता. Therefore, second opinion. Other day, Mr. Bhatia wrote in this group, he is very happy that people are interactive. His one line was enough for the success of this particular group. When he wrote at the night, when people interact, I am very happy. And there is a lot of interaction happening in the group. You ask questions, somebody answers. Sometimes I interview because I don't know routine things, so I don't write. But Ila writes, Abhishek Radha writes, other people, so Mr. Jadhav writes, Siddharth Kejriwal writes, a lot of people write. So continue to interact in law. And with this, we start this session today with 1 minute prayer for Mr. Rajpatra. Please stand up so that his blessings continue to guide us. Can we chant Om Shanti, please? Thank you.
Okay, friends, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your blessing. Arora Saab, thank you for coming. Love you, sir. I think very enlightening. Put this on. हाँ चलो चलो इसको दोनों पढ़ना. Now as lawyers, we are lawyers who are going to practice law, who are going to talk law in the courts or before the judicial authorities or tribunals. All powers in the country with anybody, even a munsif or a panchayat fellow, are given by Constitution of India. And our Constitution of India came in force on 26 January 1950. I'll quickly go through this. All public authorities, second paragraph, legislative, administrative and judicial, derive their power directly or indirectly from it. Many times we read judgment, Constitution does not permit this, therefore your laws are illegal. Even passed by Parliament. The law is passed by Parliament, go to Rajya Sabha and the Rashtrapati gives okay to it. Still Supreme Court bets it. It does it conform to the basic principles, including directive principles to the nation given by our forefathers in Constitution, whether they uphold those values. For example, right to freedom, right to equality, right to live, right to own a property, Article 300, capital A. There are all kind of fundamental rights which nobody can take away. So if, for example, Article 14 says right of equality, that is, if he is taxed at 5, I should also be taxed at 5. That is Article 14, which we use in taxation in High Court work quite a lot. So we have to understand that all these powers come from Constitution. So even when you are reading a CGST Act, it still has to satisfy whether does it conform to the constitutional values. There are so many writs are pending. For example, Section 17(5). So many writs are pending in the High Court. Can it be challenged under Constitution of India? Can you tax the value of land by deeming it or giving a 1/3 value? Already 2 High Courts have come out and decided you cannot tax it. Next is the preamble. Preamble to the statutory acts does not give much value, but preamble to the Constitution gives a lot of value. For example, when you read PGST preamble, this also tells you so many acts have been clubbed together. And the power to levy this tax on supplies or reverse charge. Supposing they want to tax entertainment tax, they cannot in CGST. There is a separate tax for it. So Constitution, we need to read these reasons. Next please. Article 14. This we use when you go to High Courts. The authorities below have no significance of Article 14 because the authorities up to tribunal, they are bound by the statute which they administer. They cannot write anything against the statute. If there is a notification, tribunal cannot say we don't accept this notification. If there is a rule, there is a circular, are binding on the officers, but it's a notification or any clarification given by the government, it is difficult for tribunal to say we don't accept. But High Courts, yes, they are creator of Constitution of India. Whether it's any High Court or Supreme Court itself is a more than Parliament. It says equality before the law and equal protection of laws, Article 14. I'm not going to read this. You will have to read it. It says all books. So what is the significance of Article 14? Many times we will say कि अगर आप गुड्स बाहर से लाएंगे तो टैक्स आपको ज्यादा लगेगा, यहाँ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग है तो रेट कम लगेगा. Why? For example, mobile phone parts. I deal with this association. We have done so much work on this particular issue. If you import chips for the phones, they are taxed higher. If you manufacture in India, tax is 0. Mobile parts. Why? That is a question of classification. Manufacture in India, tax at a lower rate. If you import, tax is higher rate. Same goods, same specification, same HSN code. So Article 14 does not give unfettered power to the authorities to do arbitrary classification. But if government can justify a classification, for example, government services under CGST Act, there is a lot of exemption. In all, 87 exemptions exist for the work you do in the government sector. But if you don't do it in the government section, you have to 18% tax, works from tax service. Why? Because this classification, government can justify that we are deviating from Article 14 for the following reasons. If court finds that this justification for a proper classification is good enough, they will uphold this law. There is nothing unequal in this. So Article 14, please read the 3 lines. More you read, better we understand the law. Next please. This is a Supreme Court ruling which says so, but I have discussed next. Interpretation of statutes. See, the word interpretation is not defined in any statute. It is like Belgam ka ghoda. Whichever you think is an interpretation is an interpretation. If you read a Bear Act, if you know what is and or, conjunctive है, disconjunctive है, ये इनका क्या मतलब है, if we have mastered those basic canons of tax. We were taxed. We got 2 stay orders in Karnataka High Court, which are still pending for disposal. Now, of course, it's all over. At that time, 2 of my friends, Rajesh and Rakesh Garg, disagreed with me. कि नहीं ये तो उसमें कवर होते हैं, ये है वो है whatever. I said no. Because liquid damages are 2 types. One is which are kind of a penalty, or which are financial cost reimbursement. That is not liquidity damages. Similarly, I work for Reliance. Electricity 6 charge, paid whether it is used or not. This also we had discussed and debated and given opinion not acceptable. We are in court. We were taxed. We will win it again. That is, it's an interpretation. If some judge has written something, that is not a final interpretation. Supreme Court also doesn't finally interpret the law. They keep changing. Because law is not a static concept. It is dynamic concept. It moves. The way up we breathe, law also breathes. Law also updates itself. For example, on this arrest of journalist, Supreme Court 1 year ago had a different view. Now they release them immediately. Interpretation of Section 3 PMLA, Money Laundering Act. What Supreme Court has given, everybody is criticizing. That's a very harsh kind of an interpretation. It will create a chaos. But that is the interpretation of judges. Tomorrow it can go to full bench, they may reverse it. We don't know what will happen. So interpretation of statutes is very important for you. That is, for example, if you get a case. Let us say आपने number लिया, आपका number उसने cancel कर दिया. 1 line email, your GST number is cancelled. बस full stop. जो लिखते हैं ये लोग गधों की तरह. अब एक तो वो हो गया नहीं कि नेशनल जस्टिस हो गया, जो हम लोग वकील लिखते हैं 4 जजमेंट 4 पेज लिखने के लिए, ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट ये कहता है, no meaning. That doesn't help you. You are only asking for one opportunity. That doesn't help you of life. You have to go back to section 29 or section 30. On what grounds you are asking could be cancelled. Whether the ground is given or not given by the authority who cancelled that case. You should examine कि ये 4 ग्राउंड है, मैंने रिटर्न नहीं भरी 3 महीने के, मैंने टैक्स जमा नहीं कराया, या मैंने नॉन फंक्शनिंग था, या मैं चोर आदमी हूँ, जो भी हो. When you file an appeal, don't write half page. You say that on the following grounds, my RC can be cancelled. None of these grounds are applicable in my case. Therefore, this cancellation is illegal, without limitation. So what are we trying to do? Once you are filing an appeal, you are trying to preempt the authority from remanding the case back. He will remand surely on this ground. But that is not the attitude of a lawyer. कि हम remand करा देंगे appeal जीत के आगे. That is suicide. For a lawyer, that is suicide. Let him dismiss. Let it finish. So अगर आपको law पढ़ना नहीं आता, अब वही लिखोगे this order is illegal, it's against natural justice, and our business will stop. So let your business stop. What does it matter? किसी authority को फर्क नहीं पड़ता business करो ना करो. But you have to sit down on that particular one-line order. उसको देर एक्ट निकालो, उसमें देखो कौन कौन से सेक्शन में आपका आरटी कैंसिल हो सकता है. क्या वो ग्राउंड आप पे कहीं बनते हैं? नहीं बनते तो अपनी अपील बनाओ. तभी we discuss how to draft an appeal and say कि yes, it's not there. Now supposing with all this in background, you have some judgment to support. RC cannot be cancelled except on the ground mentioned in the provision. Then suppose it. Don't write वो कुछ लोग फॉर्म के पीछे अपील में लिखते हैं. बस वही ग्राउंड है. फिर ये इलीगल है, ये गलत है, हमारा धंधा रुक जाएगा, हमारा ये हो जाएगा. Then what? Right? So we will discuss this. We have discussed this. Today we will finally summarize them. Next, please. Limitations. Limitation in GST law is 80% of your litigation. And I mean this. Whether limitation is in rules or in act. In my opinion, you should deem this limitation to be mandatory. Because if you do not file, for example, section 73-74, there is a new rule incorporated, rule 142 capital A, कि आपको जो पहला नोटिस आएगा उसका आपको जवाब देना है। आप कई अक्सर लिखते हैं 30 दिन में नोटिस दो। Other we're discussing a where this limitation prescribed. There is no limitation in the act for filing that applies. Because he says 30 days because उसको आपको 6 महीने में शोकत नोटिस देना है। अगर इस नोटिस में पैसे नहीं दोगे तो शोकत नोटिस आपको इशू करेगा, उसकी लिमिटेशन। But once an officer has written file within 30 days, you should not take 35 days. Even if there was a limitation of 45 days, he says 30 days. तो आप कहते हैं कैसे कर लेगा, 45 दिन का टाइम है, नहीं वो कर देगा। If you cannot finish in 30 days, go back and seek extension. कि सर इस प्रोविजन में 45 दिन का टाइम था, हमें 5 दिन और दे दीजिए, so that he does not proceed ex parte against your client. And for all your actions, if I am your client, I will hold you vicariously liable. I will sue you in the court. Because of you, I will burden with the liability. So never take things granted as a litigant professional. आपको हर बताना है, और यही चीज आपने अपने क्लाइंट को भी बतानी है। ईमेल का जमाना में पैसे नहीं लगते, चिट्ठी नहीं भेजनी कि भाई आज डेट थी, हमने ये एप्लीकेशन दी है, ये अटैच करते हैं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आई वर्क समथिंग फॉर नीतिका, I will write a mail to her, this what we have done today. If Mr. Batra was be doing something for us, he will write a mail, this what we have done today. These are basics of litigation. Your client is up to date what you have done, you are charging him money. He might say, नहीं sir, आपके बस के नहीं, किसी और से करा, let him go. But inform him. So if appeal has to be filed within 3 months after section 107, which we shall discuss today, you have to file appeal within 3 months. Condonation is not your right. एक महीने का कंडोनेशन है, जो भी कंडोनेशन पीरियड है वो आपका राइट नहीं है। इट्स ए प्योर डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ द appellate authority whether he wants to condone delay, because you still have to show sufficient cause. आप बोल रहे हैं वो तो मिस्टर वर्मा की क्लासेस अटेंड कर रहे थे, लिमिटेशन लग गई तो ये सफिशिएंट कॉज है, थोड़ा सफिशिएंट कॉज। तो आपको सफिशिएंट कॉज भी ढूंढना है उस कंडोनेशन को लेने के लिए कि भी क्या सफिशिएंट कॉज है, उससे आपको पढ़ना होगा। बड़ी सफिशिएंट कॉज हम लोग के जमाने में लिखते थे, इट्स माय पर्सनल मिस्टेक, मैं भी लिखता था, अपना एफिडेविट लगा देता। तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट की जजमेंट थी, लॉयर्स मिस्टेक, द क्लाइंट शुड नॉट सफर, दैट एग्जिस्ट टुडे आल्सो, बट कोर्ट्स हैव चेंज्ड। इट से नो, लॉयर मिस्टेक इज नो ग्राउंड फॉर कंडोनेशन डिले unless the lord comes on record and makes a statement, it's my mistake, these certificates have no value. So जहां लिमिटेशन है, जहां जिस नोटिस में आपको टाइम लिखा गया है, उस टाइम के बाद उस अथॉरिटी का राइट है, he is empowered to pass order against you. For example, मिस्टर भाटिया was saying कि 30 दिन का रिकवरी का मैंडेटरी पीरियड है, कम से कम 100 केस दिल्ली में हुए जहां उन्होंने रिकवर किया, क्या करेंगे आप? गोली मार देंगे उसको, कोर्ट जाएंगे ना, सभी कोर्ट बोलेगा नहीं गलत है, तब तक क्लाइंट आपको छोड़ देगा बाय, because yes suffered, not you. तो जहां लिमिटेशन इश्यूज है, जहां नोटिस में टाइम लिखा है, ऑलवेज रिस्पॉन्ड विदाउट फेल, चाहे वो सीजीएसटी में हो, डीटीएस हो, कोई इन्वेस्टिगेशन हो, कुछ भी आपको जाना है वहां, टाइम लेके आओ ना, चिट्ठी देके नहीं, इंसिस्ट कि सर प्लीज राइट ऑर्डर शीट, that's also more important, please write order sheet. So limitations we shall discuss, what are the sanctity of limitations under GST law. Now next please. What are the sources of law? There are two sources. One is the primary source, the enactment of a statute, parliament, ordinances. They are primary sources of law. आपका CGS Act आ गया, इसमें कुछ गवर्नमेंट अमेंडमेंट की ऑर्डिनेंसेस आ गए, those are enacted by the appropriate legislation, parliament or state assemblies. Only on those subjects on which the constitution gives them power to frame laws. Then there are secondary sources of law. For a litigant lawyer, these are 80% important, primary is 20%. So primary you can't interpret, no, you can't change anything. It's written. 80% जो आपका litigation होगा वो will be on secondary sources of law. The first is judicial decisions or the precedent. Pick up Mr. Bhatia's example कि Supreme Court judgment उनके खिलाफ है. That is a precedent which is against you. That is, if Supreme Court has decided something, there is no authority who can go against it. Unless we are able to differentiate on facts. If you remember the other classes, you have to read an entry which has been interpreted by court. Similarly, you have to read a provision which has been interpreted by a court. Whether a similar provision exists in the statute you are administering, the judgment is relevant. That is called a precedent. That is, all the authorities on a judgment passed by Supreme Court under Article 141 Constitution of India are bound by that decision, provided that decision fits in the factual matrix of your case. If it does not fit in, Supreme Court judgment has no value. Even a small circumstantial factual change will make the judgment irrelevant. I opened yesterday also at argument tribunal, you have no jurisdiction. There was an issue which when we read the law, in tribunal member have no jurisdiction. In the open court I told him, sir, you have no jurisdiction, you can't touch this file. I've been telling him for the last 6 months. And he said, I agree with you, I don't have jurisdiction. And if you have no jurisdiction, आप इसको सुन ही नहीं सकते. The issue was where the members are equally divided on a particular matter and they pass judgment for or against it either. This case has to be referred to the chairman of a tribunal where both the members write a question of law to be differed on this issue. You are sitting single, you are neither a chairman, no the case has been referred to you, no there is a full tribunal, so you have no jurisdiction. So I'm stuck, you are stuck. I don't find I let you comment give relief. So sometimes if you have not studied this, you will get an order against you and the tribunal say, "जी आपने argue नहीं किया था, हमें नहीं पता इसके बारे में." The judge will show his ignorance. Nothing he wants to say that the file is gone, disposed of, finished. He has no personal interest. But it is for you to appreciate what is the judicial precedent. If you are dealing with a tribunal, if you are dealing with authorities like GST department, if there is an order by commissioner, it is binding on all his junior officers. They cannot deviate from that order. If there is an order by tribunal, commissioner cannot deviate from that. Whether it is written in the law or not written in the law, the tribunal is an appellate authority, highest appellate authority in the system of department. If commissioners start deviating from orders of the tribunal, it will lead to judicial chaos. Similarly, within the tribunal, there can be benches like you have tax, you have income tax. In GST matter, we still don't have tribunal. If there is a judgment of full tribunal, it is binding on every member. If there is a judgment for or against a particular issue by a bench of 2 members, it is binding on a subsequent bench of 2 members. That's why income tax when you go, I don't practice income tax, but people practice, they say, it's a covered matter, Mr. Counsel. You are no case. वो आपके हक में हो या खिलाफ. So that is the importance of judicial precedent. High Court same. A jurisdiction High Court when they decide a particular issue, and you think that is the ratio of the judgment, I tell you what ratio is. That is binding on all the state authorities administering that particular courts. There is a contempt of court act. This tribunal is not a court, therefore they do not have any power to hold you in contempt, but they can refer your case to High Court. This man has done this, therefore this is contempt. So if there is a High Court judgment, supposing High Court judgment is appealed through an SLP in Supreme Court, and Supreme Court stays that operation of the judgment, it is still binding, because what is has been given is only a stay. There is a difference between order and a judgment. Judgment is in personam, in person. It affects a particular party. Order is in drum, like order under Article 142, the COVID limitation. That's an order. It's not a judgment. So order is applicable to everybody. So even if a High Court judgment is stayed by Supreme Court. The department cannot say judgment का stay हो गया. Stay doesn't mean that judgment has been set aside. Tomorrow Supreme Court can uphold also that judgment or merits. Therefore, that is again, it still remains a judicial precedent, even though in SLP, stay may have been granted by Supreme Court. All courts, if you read the COVID judgment, under Article 142, Article 142 means where Supreme Court has the power to give substantial justice to general public, they can pass any order. Any order. They have, till today they have passed around 73 orders under Article 142, including initial orders of Ram Janam Bhoomi cases. बहुत सारे केस किए हैं. अब Article 141 says that the law will be applicable on all courts. Courts means as per CPC, who have the trampling of court. But now they add on all authorities, whether they are revenue authorities, tax authorities, some authorities will give justice. That is why they add these phrases, so that there is no confusion that Article 142 with Article 141 order is applicable only to courts. That is, सारी authorities जो लिखी है सब पे applicable है. Because Supreme Court has the power to give the direction. High Court cannot. High Court has no such powers. So High Court is also a constitutional court. High Court is not subordinate to the Supreme Court for any reason. But in the hierarchy of system, Supreme Court is higher than High Court. That is why when you read Article 141, there is usually the word all courts. And Supreme Court, when they have to clarify, it's not only courts, all statutory authorities also, they write in the order. That's why they wrote in Article 142. Next please. Doctrine of stay decisions. One phrase, to adhere to the decision and not unsettle things that are established. For example, ACC case reported in 48 SCC, Justice P.M. Bhagwati gave a dissenting judgment. Interest is applicable not from date of filing of return but date of assessment. But since ACC was a majority decision, the dissenting judgment had no value in that particular matter. But when case in Maruti Wire, they say no. J.K. Sindhari judges, 5 judges, 3-2 again. A subsequent case came in Maruti Wire. In Maruti Wire, a dealer did not file the return at all. Return ही नहीं फाइल की. उसकी सारी चीजें taxable थी. Supreme Court still followed J.K. Synthetics. They said you can hang him, punish him, arrest him. But interest cannot be levied because the interest is tax according to return. Right? Tax according to return. He didn't file the return. पकड़ लो तो जेल में डालो. And if you read Maruti Wire, the language was very restrained by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court wanted to go against J.K. Synthetics. If you see the initial paragraphs. But they said state decisions will follow. They didn't want to unsettle and start a new set of litigation. So even when you are able to distinguish on facts on a particular judgment, you still have to be ready. It is, you only have distinguished. It has to still go somewhere else. Get ready for that particular battle as well. So the theory of state decisions says courts should not unsettle what has been settled. It's only an advisory theory. Courts are not bound otherwise. For example, PML judgment of Section 3 interpretation. It's a totally created revolution. Their interpretation is totally alien to what was their earlier judgments. Section 14, custom valuation. Recent 2-3 Supreme Court judgments were against settled law of Section 14 of custom valuation. So you have to be careful when you read stay decisions. That is, you are doing that revocation appeal. You have examined the particular provision के 4 ground पे आपका आरटी कैंसिल हो सकता है, वो चारों आपका applicable नहीं है. So 70% case is ready. क्या आप जीतेंगे इसको? But your job doesn't end here. It is your interpretation. Tomorrow when you get a collateral support from a particular judgment, हाँ judgment में भी ये लिखा है, उन्होंने भी इसी provision को interpretation किया है. That gives you an additional 20%. 10% is the way you can. Weekly, longly, whatever. So state decision theory you must master. A ratio, just in time. This means a judgment may be 200 pages. अगर उस जजमेंट का आपको रेशियो निकालना है तो आपको देखना है कि इसमें what was the sentinel issue, what was the key issue which the courts were trying to decide. Continue with Gst Synthetics. What was the issue? Issue was whether in view of the provisions of Rajasthan Act, where the interest was payable if the return according to tax due according to return was not paid, then interest was to be levied from the 30 days period after the assessment, not from date of filing. So this was the issue. Issue based on what? Based on a provision.
Section 11.
11B. What was the basic provision? आप अगर इस जजमेंट को हम हर जगह लागू करते हैं तो सपोजिंग अप्लाई टू सेक्शन 42(2) ऑफ एक्ट है 42 सेम लैंग्वेज नहीं, उसको आप एग्जामिन करना होगा क्या द स्कीम ऑफ द एक्ट डज इट कम टू द सेम लाइन व्हाट वी एग्जामिन इन Gst Synthetics. If yes, quote it. Simply for quoting a judgment कि हमने ये 4 जजमेंट कोट किए, it has no meaning. Any fool can quote 4 judgments. You want to be a good lawyer, good professional, you have to be first true to yourself. Are you convinced this is applicable? If not, don't quote it. 3 C's of advocacy. Convince the court. 99.9% you can never convince the court in any matter. Like I cannot convince my wife, you cannot convince your husband. It's impossible. How is that possible? So much. Second is confuse. This what we do in our family life also. Husband को confuse कर दो, बच्चों को पागल बना दो, सास को, माँ बाप को पागल बनाते रहते हैं, टोपी घुमाते रहते हैं हम लोग. So you confuse the court and hope for the benefit of doubt in your favor. Third is get convicted. Concede. Third is concede. कि अगर तुमने कोई हेराफेरी की है, बीबी से माफी मांग लो. If you don't want to be slapped again, I'm sorry buddy, I'm sorry, नहीं करती हूँ. या तुमने कहा था 4 बजे आ जाओगे, बच्चे का केक कटना था, तुम 8 बजे आ रहे हो, तो पारा बिल्कुल रेड. So better concede your mistake and say I'm sorry. If you don't concede, then the fourth issue of advocacy, you will be convicted. So this what St. Bhatia said. If you have a judgment against you, don't concede. Say I am aware of the judgment against me, but please hear me. I'll be able to distinguish this judgment. How will you distinguish? Till you have mastered the facts, till you have mastered the bare act, and till you have mastered that particular interpretation or particular provision in that judgment which you want to rely upon, you cannot distinguish. Cut, paste, copy doesn't happen in life, doesn't happen in litigation, doesn't happen in any sphere of your life. Cut, paste, copy. You are leading your life, not somebody else's life. So create your own space. That is, create your own appeal. Don't copy. अरे वर्मा जी आपने वीडियो बनाई थी जरा कॉपी भेज देना, उनके फिल इन ब्लैंक हम भी भर देंगे. हो सकता आपके फैक्टर है. You make a mockery of your own case. कोर्ट से ये क्या लिखा आपने? आपके ऑर्डर में ये लिखा है. ये तो आपके ग्राउंड ही नहीं. So only when you master the facts of the case, you master the law, that you will be able to draft a good prayer. If something you have not prayed for, it can never be given to you. आपने बहुत अच्छी अपील बना ली और जब प्रेयर बनाया मार खा गया. आपने बोला मेरा टैक्स छोड़ दो, इंटरेस्ट छोड़ दो, मेरी पेनल्टी छोड़ दो, मेरे को ये रिलीफ दे दो, मेरे को 18,500 तो आपने सारे पॉइंट लिख दिए. वो क्या थे? वो आपके ग्राउंड्स थे. Based on those grounds, you have to write the final session. What is your prayer? And prayer should never be a law-specific prayer. Don't quote any section, because then judge will interpret only that section what you have prayed for. Simply say, if the tax affidavit is illegal, therefore it should be satisfied in view of my ground. तो अगर आपने 5 रिलीफ मांगे हैं, 5 रिलीफ आपको प्रेयर में भी लिखने हैं. Don't say in view of the above, assessment order be annulled, satisfied. No. आपको 5 प्रेयर लिखनी है कि मेरा टैक्स छोड़ दो, मेरा इंटरेस्ट छोड़ दो, मेरी पेनल्टी छोड़ दो, मेरा 5 की जगह 18 कर दो, मेरा जो भी करना है आपने मांगा है तो सारा आप लिखो. So that your prayer is comprehensive. Many times in high court cases, it happened with me in the beginning of my
They throw the writ petition.
मेरे केस में थ्रो किया ना जस्टिस डीके जैन ने मेरा सेकंड मिस्टर वर्मा व्हाट इज दिस रेट
Where is the prayer?
प्रेयर नहीं उन्होंने मेरे को बोला आई रिमेंबर सेकंड केस का दिस कॉल गवर्नमेंट काउंसिल ए व्हाट इज दिस प्रेयर व्हाट इज दिस रेट हमें बता नहीं आती मैंने बोला कि इसमें सेकंड रिट पिटीशन योर ऑनर सो आई विल बी ट्रेन्ड ओके took the file back, file the mandate. Then he taught me, open court. That whatever you might have read, the synopsis and prayers should be specific. आपके facts और prayers क्या हैं, बाकी हम आपने पढ़ लें. I think तुम आपने prayer में लिखा है, मेरे को लिख दे दो. इस बात का लिख देते हैं. So we learn this way. And court में कोई शर्म नहीं करनी चाहिए. They are judges. आप उनके चेले हो. चाहे वो गधे में क्यों ना हो, क्योंकि वो judges हैं. They are sitting above you. Like I may be donkey, but you still have to listen to me only, no? So, when you want to prayer part, be very careful. If you know the state sees the story and whatever you do and what's the ratio of the judgment. For example, the salary. It is 145 STC1, state of Andhra Pradesh. Delhi High Court judgment is incorrect, illegal judgment. Or whichever way they, whatever they wrote, this judgment is absolutely contrary to the constitution. In L&T, they were interpreting Article 366(29)(a) small b. That is the power to tax works contract only, not works contract as in Section 2119 here in the GST Act. Their works contract were different. When they read this Supreme Court, when they read the constitutional provision, they said the states have power to tax when goods are transferred in the not during in the execution of works contract. And what is the taxability of works contract? When goods are incorporated in on the property of contractor. Supreme Court said the law doesn't write कि किसने लगाना है वो, काले चोर ने लगाना, उसके समान गुड्स आ गया, उसके परमिशन से वहां गुड्स लग गए, सब कॉन्ट्रैक्टर ने लगा दिया. And they wrote one beautiful paragraph because this judgment I have lectured more than 100 times in the country of this particular judgment. They wrote once goods were fixed by the subcontractor, there was nothing with the contractor which he could retransfer.
It was the property of the subcontractor only.
Yes. And the state said contractual privity. Is that what privity? Not required. What is the tax entry? Interpretation is when you incorporate the goods onto the property of the contractor, the goods are deemed to have been transferred to the contractor, you cannot take back. Without his permission, you cannot take back the goods. L&T also took a provision that there was no column in the returns to declare a subcontractor turnover. That also weighed in the mind of Supreme Court went on to say and there were not contract were not wholly subcontracted. If the L&T had a 1,000 crore contract, they subcontracted only 100 crore contract, part of the contract. They were disputing only the 100 crore turnover. Other work they did on their own. There also the same theory was there, section 4 subsection in AP Act, where this tax advice theory was there also. The Delhi High Court didn't hurry that particular matter. We don't know for what. Delhi High Court was swayed by it because their tax advices were fake. They were able to bring out a case before the High Court that the invoices on which L&T.
No, they were not fake. No.
That's what judgment wrote, they were fake. I'm not going into facts.
Well, basically, the another section was there wherein this turnover of the subcontractor was done on the formula basis.
It doesn't matter. What I'm saying is this is what the ultimate is the theory way. Supreme Court in L&T said if a contract part or full is assigned to a subcontractor, there is nothing in with the contractor which can be called as a works contract. He is not doing any works contract at all. Therefore, none of your rules is applicable. This theory of advice is saying the same thing, but it has a catch. अगर कॉन्ट्रैक्टर की टर्नओवर 100 रुपए की थी और राहुल ने मुझे 80 रुपए बिल किया तो 20 रुपए मुझे टैक्स देना है ना. So indirectly, the Delhi High Court allowed the department to tax profit part also, which in L&T subsequent case again in 2016, Supreme Court said, I told you in the beginning there is a difference between value and cost. What LP says, if you remember, cost includes profit of the subcontractor. Value is what Supreme Court, the Constitution requires. अगर value tax होगी, chapter is closed. So Supreme Court distinguished between value and cost in 2016 LLE judgment. कि value is at the hands of subcontractor. Cost is what he bills to the subcontractor. That includes the profit. So what we are discussing is the same judgment. Mr. Bhatia has a different interpretation. I have a different interpretation. This is the interpretation. So how do you call out the ratio from a judgment? So if Supreme Court is interpreting a Constitution of India, any act is irrelevant. These four paragraphs they wrote on Article 26, 29 In this sense, contractor cannot be called a works contractor itself. So once he is not a works contractor, your law is not applicable. So ratio is very important. That is before you Google a judgment, say, "अरे मिल गया, इला मिल गया judgment." इला बोलो कौन सा judgment मिला मेरे को बोलो. और आपको बढ़िया बोलेगी ये तो बिल्कुल तेरे खिलाफ है judgment. तेरे वाला केस ये नहीं है. अच्छा 3 दिन बना. So pick up 1 or 2 judgments we should think are very relevant. I'm not saying the judgments are not valuable, but that will not get the issue clinched in your favor. Next is obiter dicta. This said by the way. Remember BSNL case where demand was 45,000 crores were quashed by Supreme Court by the bench headed by Honorable Justice Uma Khan, now retired. She passed the judgment 1 day before she retired. Demand for 45,000 crores were annulled on the ground whether these airways through which your mobile phone work are these goods. She said these are not goods because these waves cannot be stored and transferred. And if you read the judgment carefully, they added a rider that nothing has been put to before us, whether in chemistry or in physics or any other science, these waves can be stored. At the same time, Supreme Court in NTPC case state of Madhya Pradesh said electricity. So this electromagnetic waves, based on this, they quashed it. BSNL में नीचे जाके डॉक्टर राधाकृष्णन ने अपनी जजमेंट में लिखा on right to use. So why are we saying so? If this judgment was not on right to use, so anything written in that judgment is obiter dicta. They were not deciding an issue of transfer of right to use goods. They were deciding whether these are goods. मैंने बड़े लोगों को सुना है, सर BSNL में लिखा है ये, लिखा है, but that is obiter dicta by the way. कि ये भी होता है। हैं? By the way, ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट का phrase है, जो मैंने कोट किया हूँ, by the way. I like this cat phrase, so I wrote by the way. So when you read a judgment, when you want to call out a ratio, you have to know what was the key issue before the court, tribunal, high court, or commissioner, or whatever, and what was the decision on that particular issue. Anything said in between, collateral statements, collateral arguments, they are obiter dicta. Obiter dicta is given by court only. Lawyers can't give any obiter dicta. हम तो अपने केस बीट करते हैं. So obiter dicta, but few judgments have come where they say that obiter dicta of Supreme Court is also binding. If this is on the same issue. The Supreme Court has never confirmed this, but the judgments have come, they have not been tested. The obiter dicta given by Supreme Court, in some cases equally binding. That is why when we pick up natural justice cases, we pick up Maneka Gandhi under Passport Act, we still invoke it in our proceedings. Why? They were not referring back there, so we are highly pushed. But we still pick up Maneka Gandhi case. Yes. But in criminal cases, we still pick up Sanjay Dutt's bail case. What was the criteria there? And for drug act, we will still pick up Shah Rukh Khan's son's case, kisko kaise bail mili. What was the other heroine who was arrested? That's also a landmark judgment. Law is never made in good cases. अच्छे केस में कभी कानून नहीं लिखा जाता. Law is written in bad cases. सभी को इंटरप्रिटेशन चाहिए. अच्छे केस में क्या करना है? हाँ, your case is good, allow पास करता हूँ तो law थोड़ा बन गया. Only in worst cases, the Supreme Court lays some cases. How next?
Well, please. There is a small break request.
कौन कर रहा है रिक्वेस्ट? सावन ये मैं इन नेताओं की बात नहीं कर रहा